Greetings, greetings. So this is the first in a series of laser short communications on scamming. And it's actually the Before You Get Scammed series. So we don't want to make this long and drawn out, but just some laser points for people to consider. And the intention is that people will develop critical thinking skills. We are in an age where so much communicating and education takes place through the internet. And today's focus is you do not know these people. This is old wisdom and common sense that we have often heard from our parents or grandparents, perhaps when we were younger and we didn't have a frame of reference, as is usually the case. We don't have a frame of reference or experience as to what the elders are saying. You don't know these people. This is especially the case today where people can create any kind of profile online, an avatar, a cartoon, an image, special effects videos. An average child or a teenager can create any kind of fantasy of who they want to project and themselves to be. And you may not necessarily have any way to test out who these people say they are. We are also in an age where we have been conditioned through social media and through entertainment. We have been conditioned to follow those who we find physically attractive and beautiful, to those who have the gift of gab and are very charismatic and dress very nicely and are masters of words and orating and speaking abilities, who know how to speak to particular audiences, whatever the culture or whatever the nationality or whatever the preference is. We're conditioned to respond to people that are very eloquent or gifted or funny with words, those who have mastered words, right? We're conditioned to follow entertainers, people who are beautiful, or those who have money or appear to have material success. Usually, those will be key triggers for us to turn off our critical thinking, and we follow as if we are hypnotized, right? Which is why entertainers are some of the most perfect people to give free clothes to, right? Fashion designers and fashion houses and businesses quite often want celebrities to wear their clothing, their earrings, or things that they're trying to sell. Because we're in a culture where we are hypnotized by charisma, looks, and people who appear to have lots of money. We are also in a time where it's very evident that people's athletic ability or their talent or their charisma or their looks don't equate with character. Years ago, you weren't able to see that because PR people did a great job of putting forth a presentation, and we didn't have social media where we had so many people actually having cameras and being able to record what's actually going on. So today, our focus is you don't know these people. You don't know me. The people that you may like that say things that you like, you don't know them. If you haven't lived with them extensively over time, you cannot vouch for their character. You cannot vouch for what they do when no one is watching. You cannot vouch for their credit rating. You can't vouch for their police record. Some people stay off the radar and you can't see their police record depending on how advanced they are. Predators can be advanced from a street pimp that is just very intuitive, or someone, an older pimp may have schooled them, or they could be trained and pimpdom in politics, or leaders of religious organizations that play on the basic fears, which are old age, poverty, disease and ill health, loss of love and never finding love, death, fear of criticism. Those 6 fears are the basic fears that people are easily manipulated by, because quite often our intellect is paralyzed when our fears are tapped into. So if you've ever been abused, if you've had transgenerational abuse passed down to you, if you're constantly taking a lot of fearful videos, it's quite easy. It's not hard for someone even with degrees or who considers themselves to be very intellectual. It's not hard to tap into someone's reptilian brain, which goes on automatic pilot to protect itself and to protect us from harm, even if the harm is actually not happening. So again, the basic fears would be fear of old age, fear of poverty, fear of ill health and disease. Pain falls under that also. Fear of loss of love or never finding love. Fear of death, fear of criticism, right? These are ways we can be easily manipulated. For example, you may have many women, there are more women on the planet than men, that may fear never finding a mate or never having children. There may be some men that have regrets that they weren't in their child's life, or that they didn't get a family, or fearing that they may never have the ideal perfect family. We have folks that are so scared of poverty because of experiences they had when they were a child, if they were exposed to harsh circumstances. There have been those people and human beings of all cultures that have been exposed or perhaps indoctrinated into sexual activity before they were mature, their bodies were mature, or before they were emotionally mature enough to deal with it. And quite often people may not speak up on it. Sometimes women not speaking up on it, or mothers, is out of fear of a loss of love. So it is very, very easy to manipulate human populations because of fear. And although different cultural groups have their different stories of creation and their stories and myths of what happens when we lay down this body temple, right? When our essence or our spirit or this body temple is no longer animated, you know, we have all kinds of stories, but we don't know that anyone really knows what happens, right? But it's very easy to prey on our fear and to get us to do things or to be manipulated. So it is up to us. It is our responsibility to cultivate discernment that applies to everyone, whether they be family members, members of our community, politicians, people you hold in esteem. There has to be some kind of common sense litmus test that you run everybody and hold them accountable to, so that you can tell who's speaking to you at any given time, because we are at a time when scamming and manipulation is at an all-time high, and it seems to only be on the increase. And handing over our critical thinking and responsibility for thinking for our own being, there's a heavy price to pay for it. Though it may seem convenient to put all of the responsibility for making decisions on someone else, then you get what you get. And so if we think of the analogy we're given quite often, because my family was raised in the church, of the pastor with sheep, right? We usually have this pristine, again, images we've been indoctrinated with of sheep peacefully in the pasture grazing on grass. But if we were really to think critically, what is the ultimate life cycle of these sheep? Eventually, the sheep are led to slaughter for food. Eventually, they're slaughtered sooner or later after they get fattened up on the grass or whatever they're eating. But we have been conditioned to have this peaceful, serene image of sheep just grazing and enjoying a peaceful life. But eventually, their life cycle is they wind up being slaughtered. So we want to be very aware and conscious of constantly repeating and regurgitating sayings that don't require us to use our critical thinking and common sense. This is not an insult, because sometimes we sit back and think of it. It is shocking how much we go with groupthink, how much we will not speak up because we don't want to be ousted from the group. We want to be liked. We seek approval. I can say this especially as women. We could get into an elevator or go into a train car and we feel uncomfortable, but we will allow, people to question us. We may allow a man to question us in an elevator and get in when something we sense feels uncomfortable. But we just answer all these questions or put ourselves in a situation because we don't want to appear to be rude. And that could cost you your life. There might be someone that might be an elder that is doing something or violating you. And this can happen with a child where they know that you're not being seen or something is being hidden and your mother or your aunties or that don't know who you are. But it's easy for our minds to be manipulated. And although many of us are adults, it is not impossible. Actually, it's not hard to manipulate people. Whether these manipulators and predators and scammers are coming from the street level as a pimp who may have perhaps learned to scam from somebody older, from an OG, which stands for old gangster. Or they may have studied other predators or gangsters or mafia or whatever. Or some people may just have cultivated through ways they were introduced to scamming or from mistreatment when they were small and developed it as a way to survive on their own and then preying on others, which may be perhaps why we see sometimes people that have been violated as children will often go to one of two different ways. either they will be a staunch protector of young people, or they may not have any kinds of boundaries or any sense of boundaries and then violate others. And at some point, especially as you mature, that is really a choice. So again, we want to emphasize, you do not know the people on the internet. You cannot vouch for their character. You can't vouch for what they do when no one is watching. You can't vouch for their credit record, their spending habits, if they are a thief. If you only go on by what pictures that you see on the internet, it's like watching a movie. What kind of litmus test can you apply to everyone so you can tell who you're dealing with, and at the very least, or at the very best, be able to set healthy boundaries with everyone you encounter, male and female, so that you are not scammed. So you can have a healthy boundary and decide over time, as you develop and cultivate a trust, who you want to let into your psyche, who you want to let into your personal space, who you want to expose your children to, who you want to have access to your finances in your bank account, who you want to know all of your personal business or your trauma, because you can't tell what they're going to do with that information down the line. It is critical that we develop a standard and a litmus test for who we allow into our psyche, our body temple, around our children, into our homes. Quite often we're so needy or so traumatized from childhood experiences or even adult experiences of violation or loneliness that we just open ourselves to anyone. And that has proven quite often, more times than not, to be devastating and catastrophic. By the time many people find out who they're really dealing with, or even simply in a case of maybe perhaps being young adults and not knowing, being aware of who you are, by the time you figure out who this person is and who you are, you may have created children that neither party was responsible enough to make a decision to be a parent. Maybe they just both wanted to engage in affection or being intimate sexually, but they were immature and they didn't know who they were. Or maybe perhaps it's a manipulator or a pimp or a predator or someone that by the time you figure out who they are, you're impregnated, or you have an STD, as is now the case, and this is prevalent. Or you may find out that the person doesn't have any kind of character or any kind of morals. Quite often, by the time people find out, it's too late and a lot of damage is done. And in the adult realm, a lot of spells that you cast, there's no reverse spell. For those intangibles, the mental pain, the emotional pain that you can't see, it's not easy to just pull that stuff back in. So prevention and being careful and setting healthy boundaries with everyone can save us a lot of heartache, especially when we decide to do our own internal work and set a litmus test and a standard for who we allow into our personal space. Also, very quickly, I just want to touch on, again, something that an elder said to me years ago, almost 30 years ago, that people can be deceptive in telling the truth. And it seemed like it made sense, but I didn't totally have a frame of reference for what she was saying. Someone can be telling you, yeah, I did it. And technically they're telling you the truth, but they're deceptive, perhaps in their timing of when they tell you, perhaps when you're vulnerable or you're in a position where you can't move financially, or you're living with them, or you've exhausted your resources, or now you're pregnant, or now you have disease, or, your options become limited, or, someone can be deceptive in telling the truth. And it's no secret, and there's no shortage of people taking bits of truth around relationships, health, or just universal principles, taking a sprinkling of truth mixed in with a whole lot of deception. Mass populations all over the planet have been manipulated into wars and just all kinds of catastrophic events through being deceptive with truth, because sometimes you may not have the answers to certain questions. And again, I'm just going to end this with saying, often we have a middleman between us and source, or between us and our curiosity, between us and God, if you want to call it that. If we have the need for a pastor, or the need, which is a natural need for community, there's a natural need for a father and for a mother. That's the most natural thing, because we all come from a mother and a father, from masculine and feminine, together for us to come onto the physical scene. But in wanting a pastor or intermediary, got to think, what is the life cycle of the sheep? Because the sheep No matter how gentle and pristine they may appear in our head to be grazing on the grass, eventually their life cycle ends in slaughter. So again, you do not know these people on the internet. You cannot vouch for their character, their credit rating, their police record, how they may hide internationally because the laws change internationally or off the grid for financial crimes or sex crimes. You don't know people on the internet. So for your own benefit, it's wise to cultivate a standard that applies to everyone across the board. You want to know what they do when no one's watching and realize you don't live with these people. So at best, take bits of the truth, but don't vouch for people's character because some of this information, if it may be new to you, but a lot of information that's being exposed in this information age is not new at all. And that's why it's so easy to manipulate young people, people under 21, or folks that may be chronologically older, but just have not been exposed to certain information. So there's so much so-called esoteric, yogic, environmental, occult. All of this information is like all over the place in this information age, and it's being used to manipulate people. So be careful, be mindful, cultivate awareness, and remember, you do not know people on the internet. You're lucky and fortunate if you can develop the discipline and the insight to get to know your own being. Okay, take care.